Good evening all, and welcome. Tonight, we have some creepy tales indeed, and I have the pleasure of being joined by fellow narrator, Sinister Sally. So be sure to give her a very warm welcome. This is indeed a two-part collaboration, and you will find even more stories on her channel once you're done here. So be sure to carry on the creepiness. But anyway, for now guys, it's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. I don't have any kids, so I can't really imagine what it would be like to have one missing. I do have a half coyote dog who used to sneak out of the yard at all times though, Colonel Wallace. So I at least have a general idea of how desperate and helpless it feels to have part of your life suddenly go missing. Like grief, it comes in stages. The denial. I just saw him a moment ago. I'm sure he's around here somewhere. Anger. It's his own fault, bloody idiot. If he gets run over by a car, then I'm getting a turtle next time. Bargaining. Missing posters, posting in local groups and calling every shelter in a 10-mile radius, and so on. Although I'm not sure any mother would ever fully reach the acceptance stage. Once they hit depression, it just loops back to denial and starts all over again. That's the feeling I got from reading the advertisement anyway. Timmy Preston, age 7, missing 2 weeks. Last seen in the Jefferson Heights playground. If you have any information on his whereabouts, please contact this number. I never turn the lights off anymore, in case it helps him find his way home. But the house has never been so dark. I'm not old enough to shake like this. Please have mercy on a grieving mother. It was the first time I've ever seen a Facebook ad for a missing person, but I guess it makes sense now. They allow you to target specific locations, and Jefferson Heights is only a few blocks away from my apartment. Next time Colonel Wallace finds a new angle to dig through my bushes, I might have to try that too. Was I going to gather a mob and start combing through the city? No. There's too much tragedy in the world to chase down every single wrongdoer. But that message really stuck with me, and so did the kid's photograph. Bright blue eyes, a sweep of blonde hair, and a light drizzle of freckles. I took a screenshot on my phone just in case, then forgot all about it. Until the next day, and the day after that, and the one after that. I don't know how much money that lady was dumping into advertising, but that post never seemed to go away. Now there's a sobering thought. The only thing worse than losing a kid would be draining the rest of your resources trying to find someone who couldn't be found. I once read an article about a woman who mortgaged on her house to pay a private investigator to track down her daughter. The kid was never found, and the woman was driven to homelessness when she couldn't make the payments. I don't remember exactly what the quote was, but it was something like, "Do I regret it? Of course not. Getting me on the streets will make it easier for me to keep looking." Well, I didn't search for Timmy. Not conscientiously anyway. I began walking my dog a different route though. One that circled around Jefferson Heights and the surrounding neighborhoods. I didn't expect to see him, but that image was burnt into my mind enough that I'd notice if I did. I'd notice a blonde kid with freckles peeking out over a fence. I'd notice how quickly he disappeared and ran back into the house, like he was afraid of being caught. I stood staring, not quite believing what I saw. The screenshot on my phone. I called the number immediately, reporting what I found. The woman on the other line was hysterical. She thanked me a dozen times and said that was her ex-husband's house, although he ever denied seeing the boy. She told me she was going to call the police right away, and that I might want to get out of there if I didn't want to get involved. I'm not ashamed to say that I felt like the world's biggest hero for the rest of the day, at least until the evening news, when I saw that familiar picture flash once more. Timmy Preston, abducted from his legal guardian, the local news reported. I turned up the volume, half expecting to hear the woman thank me by name. Taken from his backyard this afternoon. I turned off the TV and just stared at the blank screen. I guess I'm still in the denial phase.
The suicide room. That's what they call room 733. As if I didn't have enough to worry about on my first day as a freshman. We had assigned to dorm room 734, which, it turns out, wasn't one of the nice add-on rooms in the South Hall. No, we'd found ourselves in the older wing of the building on the 7th floor. I wasn't too bummed out, though. At least they honored my request to room me with my best friend. Lydia and I spent most of the morning moving ourselves in. By the time our resident advisor came, I was taping up posters and Lydia was reading. "Hi girls, I'm Beth," chirped the bubbly blonde as she bounced into our room. "I'll be your RA this year." "Hi," I nodded at her. "Wow, you girls work really fast," she said, taking in our made beds and hung up clothes. Beth picked up a drawing of Cthulhu that Lydia had done over the summer. She turned it sideways, studying it. "Is this the Kraken from the Pirates of the Caribbean?" Lydia glared at her over the top of her book. "So, anyway," the RA continued, "I know our hall isn't as new as the South Hall, but trust me, there's a lot of history here. This building is almost 60 years old." "Yes, I can see that," I said, looking around. "The rooms are pretty small." "Well, they were smaller in the 50s, Beth shrugged. "Really?" Lydia said flatly. "Yep, really." Beth pursed her lips and just continued to stand there, while the room filled with awkward silence. "So," I said, "the corner room next to us, 733, is it? It looks a lot bigger than our room. Is anyone assigned to that room, or could we maybe—" "Oh, you don't want that room," Beth interrupted. "There are a couple of suicides in there. A hanging and a jumper, if I remember right. They're not assigning anyone to that room. Anyway, I'd just like to remind you that this is an all-girls floor and guys are not allowed up here after 11. Before we could reply to her, Beth clapped her hands and, with a quick, "Well, nice meeting you," she skipped out of the room. Lydia dropped her book on the bed and stared out into the hall. I hate her. Did you hear that bomb she fucking dropped? I'm going to call her dumb shit Beth. Lydia, seriously. Suicides? Oh, Becca, relax. Every college campus has a few suicides. Yeah, but in the same room? Lydia sighed. Really, who cares? It's not our room. Yeah, I guess. I turned to study the little window in our room. Can you imagine climbing out of that tiny window and jumping? You'd be alive for at least 5 seconds before you hit the ground. Oh fuck, Becca, can you not? Lydia glanced at the window and visibly shuddered. You know I fucking hate heights, and just talking about that shit is raising my blood pressure. We could always move into the suicide room, I teased her. The one that has a window on each wall. Fuck you. Okay, but seriously, think about it. It would take a lot of commitment to squeeze out of that tiny window. Yeah, well, remember, people were apparently smaller back then, Lydia mumbled as she pushed her bed further away from the window. Since Lydia was an outgoing and friendly person, we made friends at lightning speed. There were a lot of parties in those first few weeks, at one of which Lydia inevitably met a guy. I'd known the girl since we were in diapers, so I fully anticipated her having a boyfriend by the end of September. His name was Mike, and he wasn't anything special. Just your standard frat pledge douche canoe. After a month on campus, the novelty of college started wearing off. Lydia and I found our stride, and we spent more weekends studying than drinking. Midterms were coming up in a few weeks, and I was determined to maintain a 4.0 GPA throughout my freshman year. One night in early October, I was awoken by a loud, grinding sound. I sat up in bed and strained to hear it again. Lydia was also wide awake and listening. Slam. What the fuck? She mouthed to me. It wasn't unusual for there to be noise in the hallways, since other people came in at all hours of the night. But this sound had definitely come from the next door, the corner room. Grind. Is that... Yeah, Lydia whispered. That's the window next door. At Lydia's insistence, we kept our window closed at all times. However, there is no mistaking the sound of the window in room 733 being opened and closed again at regular intervals. Slam. Who's in there? Lydia shrugged. Is someone fucking with us? Is this like initiation? Lydia raised her eyebrow at me. Initiation to what? I don't know, college? Maybe they're hazing the freshmen? Grind. It opened. Who is hazing freshmen? I shrugged. Slam. It shut. Becca, I love you, but that was fucking stupid. I threw a pillow at her. Well, whoever it is, go tell them to knock it the fuck off. Me? I'm not risking being thrown out a window. Grind. Well, I'm not doing it. I'm an art major. You're a political science major. You go lay down the law. Fuck that. Been called dumb shit Beth. Isn't this the kind of nonsense she should deal with? Slam. I'm not calling her. Don't you put that evil on me. Fine, Lydia whispered loudly. Then we'll just have to ignore it. I have class at 7:30, I whispered. Grind. Then do something. Ugh. I got out of bed and stomped to the window, threw it open dramatically, and went down the hall to pound on the door of room 733, which simply said, supply room. People are trying to sleep. Please fucking stop, I said when there was no answer. Slam. Dude, seriously? I sighed. I stepped back from the door and immediately noticed problem. Room 733 was padlocked shut from the outside. I hurried back to my room. What happened? Lydia asked. I'm not going anywhere near that fucking room again. It's locked from the outside. I don't know how anybody could go in there. So you're saying it's a spooky ghost? She laughed. No, I'm saying that there's creepy shit going on inside a room colloquially called the suicide room. Lydia scoffed and rolled back over to go back to sleep. You should have been a drama major. We didn't hear the window next door again that night, but the next morning you could clearly see from the outside that both windows in the corner room were now wide open. I watched the windows on room 733 for an entire week, but they remained open. Occasionally at night, I thought I could hear noise next door, like marbles dropping and rolling across the floor. Since it never woke Lydia up, I didn't bother saying anything. One afternoon, I was alone in the dorm editing notes on my laptop. I had my headphones in, but the music wasn't loud enough to cover the noise of someone knocking on the door. Come in, I said without looking up from the screen. A moment went by, and then I heard the knocking again. I jerked my earbuds out and slammed my laptop closed. I turned around. Come... What the fuck? The door to the hallway was wide open. I'd left it open on purpose since Ian, a junior I was dating, was supposed to be stopping by. I heard the knocking again from behind me and literally jumped out of my chair. It had come from the other side of the room. The closet door. It was the closet that shared a wall with room 733. Lydia, you're not fucking funny. Nothing. Lydia, I swear to God, I will punch you in your face. Silence. I walked over to the closet door and grasped the handle. Lydia, you're fucking... A fucking what? Her voice came from the doorway behind me. I let go of the doorknob and stumbled back, wide-eyed. Lydia threw her stuff on the bed and turned to me, crossing her arms. I'm a fucking what? I thought you were hiding in the closet, I said lamely. What? Why? Because someone was knocking on the door. Jesus, Becca. Lydia rubbed her forehead and walked over to the closet, throwing the door open. There was nothing there but clothes and boxes. She made a swipe of her arm as if to say, what now? I swear, Becca, there's no one here. I know what I heard. We glared at each other until our little standoff was interrupted by the timely arrival of Ian. He immediately sensed the tension in the room. Hi, ladies. What's new? I gave my roommate a hostile look. There's strange shit going on in the room next door. But that's not new. Which room? 735 or the empty one? The empty one, Lydia emphasized. 733? Yeah, I'm not surprised. That's the suicide room. Right? We heard about the deaths. I sat down on my bed. Yeah, it's pretty fucked up. 3 suicides all in one dorm room. 3? Lydia raised her eyebrow. We were told that there were 2. Well, there were a couple people in the 70s and then some guy about 10 years ago. He jumped out the window. Lydia and I both shuddered. Although she was much worse. We were both terrified of heights. A falling death was the worst thing I could think of. I will admit that 3 suicides in the same room is fucking disturbing, Lydia said in an apologetic tone. Yeah, I heard there's something in that room, Ian said. Like what? No one knows, but every year someone has a new theory. Usually right around Halloween, something gets published in the campus paper. Whatever is in there, though, it ain't friendly. So has anyone ever killed themselves in the neighboring rooms, like this one? Nah, just 733. Honestly, I was surprised when I heard that they were opening the North Hall this year. They told us that we were the biggest incoming freshman class in 20 years, I said absent-mindedly. Yeah, I heard that too. You know, you could request a room change. Ian sat down on the bed next to me. I leaned against his shoulder. Yeah, but they wouldn't keep us together, Lydia cut in. Becca and I have been best friends for 15 years. We can't room with other people. So we should just keep living here, next to Satan? I glanced at the closet door again. Lydia shrugged. At least we'll have some stories to tell after graduation. These aren't the kind of stories I want to tell. A few days later, Lydia began to believe my closet story. I woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of someone whispering. I looked over at Lydia, who was already staring at me with wide eyes. She slowly brought a finger to her lips. I listened intently, trying to hear what the voice was saying and where it was coming from, but I couldn't even understand one word. I got out of my bed and tiptoed over to Lydia's. The whispering was definitely louder over there, but then she shared a wall with room 733. I listened harder. Never taken mouths of fools. What the hell? Lydia leaned over and put her ear to the wall. The whisper suddenly stopped, and I leaned closer. Suddenly, there was a loud bang from the other side. Lydia immediately recoiled and clutched her ear in pain. Someone was in there. Suddenly, more angry than scared, I again threw open our door and stomped over to the supposedly empty supply room. I banged on the door loudly, not caring who else I woke up at this point. Are you fucking kidding me? I yelled at the door. This shit isn't funny anymore. Come out of that fucking room, you asshole. Silence. And then the doorknob started to turn. I don't know what I expected to happen, but it wasn't that. I backed up so far from the door that I ran into the opposite wall. When the handle had turned all the way down, something started to push from the other side. The door groaned loudly, but the locks held. I held my breath until the pressure of the door subsided and the handle slowly returned to its normal position. I noticed Lydia peeking her head out of the room. She held her hands as if to say, "What happened?" "Someone thinks they're funny," I answered her out loud. She shook her head and disappeared back into our room. I knelt down on the floor and brought my head down to the carpet, peering under the door crack. It was the first time I had seen into the corner room. Room 733 was definitely a supply closet. There were chairs stacked along one wall and bed frames along the other. A few rotting mattresses were piled under one of the windows, and a thick layer of dust covered everything in the room. The windows were absolutely huge, which was something you really couldn't tell by looking up at the building. They were always open, and I could definitely see how someone could easily climb through them and outside to the edge. The room didn't look like it had been disturbed in a couple decades, which sent a shudder racking through my body. The moonlight, which had been providing enough light to see into the room, suddenly vanished, and I saw only pitch black inside. I blinked rapidly, trying to adjust my night vision. I squeezed my eyes shut, and when I opened them, a large yellow eye was looking back at me, only a few inches away from my face on the other side of the door. I screamed and woke up half of the dorm. There was no denying that things were escalating. The next morning, Lydia and I put in our dorm change requests with resident services and hoped for the best. In the meantime, we agreed we would never be alone in our dorm room at night. Either we spent the night at home, or neither of us did. We started spending most nights with our respective boyfriends. I told Ian everything that had happened, and he suggested maybe I talk to the campus Paranormal Society. I hesitantly made an appointment, and Lydia and I met with a small, cleanly dressed kid named Craig, and 4 of his colleagues the following Tuesday. We told them everything we could remember, every incident, no matter how small. Craig and the 4 other members of the Paranormal Society sat quietly and took notes for half an hour. It wasn't until we finished that anyone spoke. "Is that all?" Craig asked. "Yes," I said slowly. "Would you mind waiting out in the hall for a few minutes so I may confer with my colleagues?" "Sure." Lydia smiled indulgently and stood up. "Whatever you need." The door had barely shut behind us when Lydia snorted and rolled her eyes. "Let's go." "Go where?" I asked. "Are you serious?" "Lydia, come on, we need help. I am freaking out. We hadn't stayed one night in our dorm since Thursday, so this isn't something we can just brush off. Okay, she threw her hands up. Let's hear what they have to say, and then we can go over to resident services and check our move requests. We loitered in the hallway for another 15 minutes before Craig came out and asked us to come back and take a seat. With all the pomp and circumstance of a meeting parliament, Craig cleared his throat and made his diagnosis. What you're dealing with, ladies, is a very angry ghost. Is that your professional opinion, Craig? Lydia said. I shot her a look. Yes, he stuttered. A vengeful spirit. A spirit? I asked. I very much doubted that that's what we were dealing with. Yes, answered one of the not Craigs. That's a ghost to the layperson. Jesus Christ. Lydia groaned and rubbed her temples. Mistaking Lydia's frustration with despair, Craig rushed right into his speech. Don't be afraid, ladies. We're going to take care of you. It's true that spirits can be quite a headache if you don't know exactly how to exorcise them, which is why it's good you came to us. Suicides almost result in angry ghosts. They need revenge. Revenge on whom? I asked. On other students. Perhaps this particular spirit was bullied into taking his own life and now seeks to torment others. Listen. We can take care of this for you right away. All we ask is a small donation to the society, Craig continued. We honestly didn't realize that room was having this much activity. It's really very exciting. Great, well, thank you for your time, Lydia said as she grabbed my hand and pulled me out of my chair. Do you want me to set up something for this weekend? Craig asked. Tell you what, we'll call you. Lydia hurried me out of the room, wearing a weary look, and we didn't speak again until we were almost at the admin building. That was a waste of time, she said. Look, I'm not disagreeing with you, but Becca, tell me you didn't honestly buy into that. So you don't think it's I was having trouble even saying the word. It sounded so ridiculous. Ghost? Well, I don't fucking know, but neither do they. That guy had no idea what the fuck he was talking about. I pulled my hood lower over my eyes as we stepped into line at the resident service desk. Let me put it this way, Lydia continued. They're playing Ghostbusters, and we're living the fucking Exorcist. Fine, I sighed. Then what do you want to do? Just keep sleeping at Mike and Ian's until we get reassigned? I just want this to end. Lydia crossed her arms and stared straight ahead. We all wanted this to end. Even if living next to that fucking room wasn't scary, it sure as hell was distracting. All right, well, I mean, we're probably safe during daylight hours, so as long as we don't spend nights there, we should be okay. Our room is only ghost adjacent after all, and our new assignments will come through soon. I checked my watch. Fuck, it's almost 2. Shit, really? I gotta go. Mike got accepted into Sigma Chi, and he's getting initiated today. Oh yeah, I forgot he got rushed. The girl at the desk waved us forward. I hadn't even realized we'd reached the front of the line. Let me know what they say, Lydia said as she ran out the door. The girl at the desk eyed me suspiciously as I approached. Hi, You're the girl trying to move out of 734 in Riley, aren't you? She caught me off guard. Yeah, I'm one of them. How'd you know? Sorry, I overheard you. I also saw your file across my desk a few days ago, and I gotta ask. Why are you looking to transfer rooms exactly? I was tired, I was beaten down, and I didn't have enough energy to think of a lie. Because shit is going on in the empty room next door, and it's really freaking us out. Noises, whispers, knocking. The other night I saw someone. You saw someone? Yeah. In room 733. Yeah, I looked under the door. There was definitely someone in there. The girl narrowed her eyes at me for a moment and then nodded for no particular reason. Well, your rooms aren't ready yet, but I pushed them through as a priority. For right now you're stuck, though. There isn't anywhere else we can put you. I sighed. I'd figured as much. I'm Alice, she continued. And look, I've actually done a lot of research on the Riley suicides, and I think I can help you, or at least offer some insight. Really? I asked hesitantly. Absolutely. I'm in Taylor Hall, room 310. I'll be back to my dorm by 4 today. Thanks. We just came from the Paranormal Society on campus. Ugh, say no more. Alice rolled her eyes. Yeah, so I'll definitely see you at 4. Great, Alice said and smiled. I was early to Taylor, but then so was she. I told our story for the second time that day, and Alice wasn't afraid to interrupt with questions, though her queries didn't betray her thoughts. When I was finished, she leaned back in her chair and sighed deeply. I can't believe it. She shook her head. I'd always heard rumors, but I honestly doubted any of it was true. I can assure you, everything I've told you is absolutely true. And how is it now, when you're there? We aren't even there at night, but during the day we've heard scratching on the wall. Really quiet whispering, and sometimes we still hear the window opening and closing, in broad fucking daylight. However, every time I look up from the street, the windows to 733 are open. Alice nodded. Well, for the record, I don't think you're in any danger. As much as it sucks, you guys are simply a casualty. You need to stay out of room 733. I snorted. Are you kidding me? I would never go in there. I believe that you believe that, but this thing, whatever it is, it's tricky, manipulative, a liar, and it's smarter than you. I'll try not to be offended by that. You shouldn't be. What do you think it is? Something very old and very evil. I regarded her skeptically, then let my eyes wander around the room. I hadn't really noticed the decor before, but to say Alice had an interest in the occult was an understatement. I can't see any situation where I'd be compelled to enter that room. I know, but you have to be prepared that there may come a time when you have to make a decision about entering that room. Because what you're dealing with, it's already killed 5 people. 5? I thought it was 3. Yeah, well, not everyone is inclined to do a level of research that I do. Let's see. There was Ellen Burnham in 1961. She jumped out of the window. She was the very first. And then Tads Collinsworth in 1968. He jumped too. Melissa Grigg in 1975. She hung herself. Erin Murphy in 1979. She jumped. And then Eric Doudston in 1992. He hung himself. 5 suicides? How could the university still let people live in there? They don't, apparently. That's why it's a supply room. And back then? Well, every few years, once everyone who would remember had graduated, the room would be reassigned. This was before the internet, you know, and the incoming freshmen were clueless. But after that last one, Eric Doudston, they closed the entire north hall of the 7th floor and built more rooms onto the south hall. So what does it want? Alice shrugged. Chaos, death, souls? Who knows? No one even knows what it is. So what do we know? We know that it's somehow bound to that room, and though it seems to have minimal influence just outside of it. We know that everyone who ever died in there was alone at the time. And we know that it's a trickster. That's what we know. It wasn't enough. Why do you think they do it? I asked quietly. The victims? I nodded. All I know is what's rumored to be in the evidence files. All suicides were found with pictures or writings that were considered unspeakable at the time. They contained horrible, evil things that would make you physically sick to read or see, they say. And these people, they drew them, they wrote all that stuff? Yep. Whatever is in that room drove them mad. That's fucking terrifying. Have you guys considered getting somebody to bless the room? Jesus. Well, you'll have a hard time getting him, but perhaps some sort of holy person. No, I mean Jesus. You're talking about an exorcism. Alice shrugged. Maybe. The rumor in the 70s was that this all started with a Ouija board game gone wrong in 1961. Really? That shit's made by Hasbro. Not in the 60s it wasn't. Anyway, it's just a rumor. The only person on campus who would know is Tom Moen, an admin. I've tried to talk to him before, but he refuses to see me. Did he go here in 1961? Yes, and he was staying in Riley. We need to talk to him. I need to know what the fuck is happening, or I won't be able to live the rest of my life as a well-adjusted person. I suppose we can try to chase him down on campus. Can we talk to him tomorrow? We can try. Mr. Moen wouldn't see us that day or the next. We tried to catch him on his lunch hour and then again while he was leaving work, but he got around us every time. It was soon clear that the old man was actively avoiding us. Liddy and I had seen little of each other since we'd continued to sleep in other dorms. I went back to our room twice a day, once in the morning and once in the afternoon. Usually the other room was silent, but that didn't make me feel better. I could always sense something on the other side of the wall, somehow watching me. It felt like the calm before the storm. The Thursday before Halloween, I came back to the dorm to shower in the evening, much later than usual. I'd seen Lydia that afternoon, and she'd informed me that she'd got enough clothes stored at Mike's to last until graduation, so I knew I'd be there alone. I showered down the hall in safety of the bathrooms and then walked back to my room to change. I was supposed to meet Ian in half an hour to head out to a party, and I wanted to get out of here as quickly as possible. Since the silence was unnerving to me, I threw my iPod on the docking station and turned up AC/DC. I got dressed, then stood in front of the mirror to dry my hair. I flipped my head over and blow-dried upside down to try and give my hair some more volume. When I flipped my head back up and shut off the blow-dryer, I immediately noticed the silence in the room. But that wasn't all I noticed. I wasn't in my dorm anymore. Behind me was reflected the dusty bed frames and large open windows of room 733. I spun around to panic to find that I was actually standing in my own room. I looked back at the mirror to see that 733 still reflected there. A slight movement behind me was all it took to make me run. I grabbed the purse and fled from my room, slamming the door behind me. On the elevator ride, I called Alice. "I can't do it anymore," I said when she picked up. "I can't go back into that room. I can't ever go back." "What happened?" I told her. "Jesus, what do you want to do?" she asked. "I need to talk to someone who knows what the fuck is going on. Is Tom Moen the only person who was here in 1961? "The only one I know of. Maybe we can get him on his way tomorrow morning. We'll just corner him and refuse to move until he tells us something. He comes in at 6:30 according to the schedule I have. Do you want to meet me outside the Starbucks in the atrium?" "Fuck yeah, I do, but I have class at 7:30, but I'll blow it off." "Okay, see you then." I wasn't usually much for parties, but I was glad I was going to one that night. As soon as we got there, I asked Ian to get me a drink. Since I wasn't usually much of a drinker, he gave me a raised eyebrow. I gave him a brief synopsis of what had happened earlier, hoping he wouldn't think I was crazy. Ian made me a scotch and coke. It was the first of many. Around midnight, I went to have a cigarette and checked my phone. I had a voicemail left from Lydia at 11:04 p.m. "Hey Becca, listen. I just had a huge fucking fight with Mike. I guess his frat decided that for Halloween this year, all the new brothers would have to spend the night in the suicide room, in our dorm. I just can't. I can't fucking take it. He knows what's been going on with us, and he still agreed to do this. He's now trying to convince me that Sigma Chi is behind all of the stuff going on in room 733, because they've been trying to drum up the buzz for the Halloween deal. I can't." I hit end on my phone, threw it in my bag. No wonder Lydia was pissed. This was not good. Not good at all. I found Ian and asked him to take me home. I was suddenly very stressed, very tired, and very drunk. When the alarm clock went off at 6 a.m., it took everything I had to pull myself out of bed. I got dressed in the clothes I'd worn the night before and shuffled my way across campus to the atrium. Alice was already there with a black coffee in hand. "I figured you'd need this," she laughed. "How'd you know?" "Your text." "I texted you last night?" "Yeah, at about 1. You told me about Sigma Chi." "Oh God, yeah." I pushed my sunglasses higher up my nose and pulled my hood lower over my eyes. "Those guys are idiots. Remember how I told you that it's crafty? Well, what if the point of messing with you was to make 733 provocative, to seduce people into going inside? No one has been in that room for years. Can you imagine how hungry that thing is? Do you really think they're at risk?" I asked as I sat down on the steps of the admin building. "Yeah. In fact, the only thing they have going for them is that all the suicide victims were alone at the time of their deaths. So it'll be less powerful with all of them in there. Theoretically, we would know a lot more if we knew what it was. And we can't know what that is without knowing how it got there. And this is why we need Moen. What time is he supposed to be here?" "Actually, 20 minutes ago," Alice said grimly. It was another half hour before we reassigned ourselves to the fact that Mr. Moen had snuck around us, as usual. We went to the front office, hoping to beg for an appointment with him anyway. The woman at the admin desk regarded us coldly. "Tom isn't coming in today. Or any other day for that matter. He quit yesterday. Looks like you won't be harassing him anymore." "We weren't harassing him," I said. "We just desperately needed to talk to him." "We still do," added Alice. "Well, you won't get any of his personal information from me," she had snided and walked away. "What the fuck do we do now?" I asked Alice. "Without Tom Moen, there's nothing left to do." "Alice, fuck. I can't go back to that room." "Well, then I guess it's good that your transfers came through." "They did?" "Yep, I got the notice when I checked my work email this morning. You're going to Morton and Lydia's going to Tinsley." "Oh, thank God." "I thought you'd be happy about that. I also convinced my boss not to assign anyone else to room 734. "Thank fuck. The only thing is, you won't be able to move until Monday." "I can last through the weekend, especially now that the end is in sight. I have to tell Lydia." I opened my phone to pull up Lydia's number, but my attention was caught by the red 1 badge over the voicemail logo. I hit play and it was the rest of the message from last night. "Even look at his dumb fucking face anymore, so I'm going to head home. Don't worry about me, I'll be okay. I'm drunk enough to sleep through any bullshit from next door. I'm just so fucking pissed off right now. I would honestly rather deal with dumb shit Beth than Michael, my parents must be siblings because I'm not fucking retarded Benson. Let's hang out tomorrow. Love ya. The message ended. God damn it. Alice gave me a questioning look. Lydia spent the night in our dorm. Alice cringed. She's safe though, right? As long as she doesn't go into 733. She won't. I thought of the always large open windows of the corner room. If nothing else, the mere thought of those would keep Lydia the hell out of that room. Well, good. Since we have nothing else to do now, do you want to go look for theology books in the library? It's pretty much the only thing open right now. Sure. I shrugged. I didn't have another class until 10. The little old lady who sat behind the library checkout desk must have been 1,000 years old. Miss Stapley's eyes were small and watery, and her skin looked like it was melting off of her skull. Still, she was nice and knowledgeable, and she sent us in the right direction for books on demonology, though she gave a curious look as she did. There wasn't much. We read everything we could, but it either wasn't relevant or wasn't in English. We returned to her desk 30 minutes later. Do you have anything on the occult? The occult? Her voice trailed off. Yes, I do. Over there to the left of the reference section. Okay, thanks. Sorry. I'm too hungover to use the Dewey Decimal System, I said. I don't think she likes the looks of us, Alice whispered as we walked away. Our look or our subject matter? Probably neither. Within the hour, we were back up at our desk, having struck out again. We could tell she was getting annoyed, as she narrowed her eyes suspiciously as we approached. Sorry, do you know where we could find something on seances or Ouija boards or... Now listen, girls. Miss Stapley stood up from her desk and looked over her glasses at us. I really hope that this is for class. It is, I said. It's not, Alice answered simultaneously. It's personal research. Research? What kind of research? Look, we're not going to mess with a Ouija board or anything, I said. Good. Miss Stapley smoothed her pleated pants and sat back down. Because I can't have that sort of thing going on here again. Again? Alice latched on. The older woman suddenly looked very uncomfortable and started fidgeting with a stack of books on her desk. We may have something on seances and... Miss Stapley, we're researching what happened in Riley in 1961, Alice interrupted. And also what's been happening there ever since. Well, it's no secret, is it? A student committed suicide in that room. Dreadful, but not unheard of on a university campus. 5 students, I corrected her. But you know that, right? Alice was suddenly talking very fast. Because you sound like you're well-versed in this story. Please, tell us how this started and we might be able to end it. End it? Miss Stapley's voice became quieter but more concentrated. Don't be so arrogant, young lady. You can't end it. People have always died in that room and they always will. There's no end to it, so you best stay far away from it. But maybe we knew if how this all started. It was just as you think it did. But everyone that was involved is either very old or very dead by now. Just stay away from that room. Concentrate on your studies. I leaned over her desk. Well, I'd love to, but they assigned my friend and me to the room next door. Maybe you can forget about all the suicides, but we can't. It won't fucking let us. Young lady, I never forget. Miss Stapley's voice was even quieter now. My friend Ellen was the very first to be killed in that room. She was my very best friend, and not a night goes by where I don't imagine her wiggling out of that tiny window, standing upon the cold ledge in her bare feet and jumping off the 7th floor of that building. Alice sighed. I'm really sorry, I didn't know. Yes, well, these are old wounds, my dear. Now, girls, I suggest you request a room assignment immediately. No one should be living on the 7th floor of that building, and that's all I'm going to tell you about it. Alice sighed, but resigned herself to a nod. We wouldn't learn anything more here. Still, it was quite a breakthrough. At least we had some new information now. Alice walked away, and I made to follow her, but my feet wouldn't move. Something was bothering me. A small yet poignant word had been buried in Miss Stapley's story. A word that suddenly seemed very important. Miss Stapley, I asked the old tired woman at the desk, why did you refer to the windows in 733 as tiny? Because I've even seen those, and they're huge, like 5 feet tall. Dear, you're thinking of the corner room. That's the supply closet. Room 733 is next door to that. No, I stuttered. That's room 734. Yes, well, it is now. When they built the additional rooms on the South Hall, they moved all the room numbers down. Oh my God. I suddenly felt very hot and dizzy. That sneaky fucker. Alice whispered next to me, her skin paling. Lydia. We took off across the campus at a dead run, witnessed only the few bleary-eyed students on their way to morning classes. When Riley came into view, I stumbled on the pavement as my blood turned to ice. From our vantage point, we could clearly see the windows of the corner room were closed. The first and only time I had ever seen that way. And the window to my room was open. We ran into the lobby, pushing past several latte-sipping, Ugg boot-wearing freshmen who had just gotten off the elevator. I hit 7 and watched the doors close more slowly than they ever had before. I leaned against the wall, trying to steady my breathing. Alice, how the fuck did this happen? I don't know. I don't fucking know. She's been there all night, Alice. In our room, alone. Alice shook her head but had nothing to say. When the doors finally opened on floor 7, we saw a quiet, deserted hallway. I ran toward my room with Alice right behind me. Rounding the corner, I threw open my door hoping it wasn't locked. And it wasn't. Lydia looked back at me, and for one breathless moment, a cruel glimmer of hope crossed over her tear-streaked face. But I was too late. The next second, she leaned forward so slightly and she was gone. She screamed the entire way down. Alice ran to the ledge where Lydia had just been while I stood motionless. She stuck her head out the window and looked down just as a different kind of screaming started back from the bottom floor. Alice closed her hand over her mouth and pulled her head back into the room as tears of shock ran down her ghost-white face. The screaming from the outside got louder as more people saw what remained of my best friend on the cold pavement. I leaned back against the dresser and slumped to the floor. A falling death. Lydia never wanted a falling death. I absent-mindedly picked up one of the pictures that were strewn all over the floor. It was a picture of Lydia's mother. She was dead. I picked up another picture. It was Lydia's baby sister. She was dead too. There were dozens of pictures just like that all over the floor. Lydia had been busy last night. As for the things depicted in them, I cannot tell you. Lydia was a talented artist, and I only saw a few before I got sick on the floor next to me. Alice was standing in the doorway yelling something down the hall. I don't know what she was saying because all I could hear was a high-pitched whine in the room. Suddenly, a piece of paper slipped out from under the crack of the closet and glided across the floor towards me. I picked it up and studied it for a moment. This was drawn by Lydia too, but it wasn't like the others. It was a picture of the closet from my exact vantage point. In the drawing, the door was cracked, and there was something looking back from the darkness. I put the paper down and studied the closet. The door was cracked open, just like the picture. I squinted my eyes and tried to see inside. Just as I started to distinguish the defined lines of a long face looking back at me, Alice pulled me to my feet. "We need to get out of here," I thought I heard her say. I never went back into that room. My parents moved my things, and I spent the rest of the semester in an apartment off campus. I transferred to an out-of-state school for my spring semester and finished my degree there. Every night, I dream of Lydia pulling herself through that tiny window, shimmying out onto the cold ledge, standing up and knowing that there's nothing between her body and the terrifying abyss in front of her. I watch her look down the 7 stories to the black pavement below and realize, though not accept, her terrible fate. I see the blind horror cross her familiar features. I hear her wildly pounding heart, desperate, trying to race through every beat of life she would have lived, and knowing it only has mere seconds. I watch her look back at me, and I watch her fall. It has been 9 years since that night, and every fall semester for 9 years I've called resident services to see which dorms are open for new students' assignments. Riley is always open. The 7th floor is closed. This year, life and work got in the way, and I called much later than usual. I was put on hold immediately. "Resident services," a man finally answered. "Were you the one asking about the rooms open in Riley?" "Yes, that's me." "We're entirely filled up, and there's a waiting list for Riley, but, as it happens, you actually have great timing. I make no promises, but we may be able to get you in. We just got approval this morning." "Approval for what?" I said slowly. "We're opening up the 7th floor."
I couldn't have known they were voices when my hydrophone first recorded the sound. My best guess was a bowhead whale, although the pitch didn't fluctuate or go nearly as high as the typical bowhead. This sound was sonorous and powerful, a seemingly sourceless echo reverberating through the ocean's depths for at least a dozen miles around my ship. My name is Alyssa Williams, studying the effect of global warming on hourglass dolphins and other Arctic mammals. hydrophone recordings are an essential tool in calculating the density and diversity of ocean life, although this is the first time I've heard something like this in the past 2 weeks I've been at sea. We like to think these expeditions give us a pretty good idea of what's going on down there, but it's really more like scooping a bucket of water from the ocean and concluding whales don't exist because they didn't fit in the bucket. There are plenty of unexplained phenomenon and outlier data points, and most of the time we have to just ignore them so they don't contaminate the rest of our data. It was only chance that kept me from ignoring this sound altogether. My son is an electronic music artist, which I'm pretty sure is the same as a DJ, and he asked me to send him some marine recordings to sample into his music. Every week, I pick out a few interesting noises to send to him, and lacking anything else to do with this mysterious echo, I included it in the last batch. A couple of days later, I get an email back. He's been playing around with the sound, and after speeding it up, he noticed it started to sound like voices. He thought I was playing a prank on him, and I thought he was the one trying to fool me. It wasn't hard to prove though. As soon as I sped up the tapes, I began to hear it too. It was speaking in Spanish, at least at first. It kept switching every other sentence or so, mostly to things that sounded like language, but not one I recognized. I kept pausing the tapes until I was fairly confident I had a few words right. Afrikaans and Ndebele were beginning to pop up regularly. Then about 10 minutes into the tape came this in English. I know you're listening. I am listening to you too. The languages and dialects were consistent with Chile and South Africa, two of the closest countries to the north shore of Antarctica, where my vessel was located. I sat on my bunk, playing the tapes over and over, editing and re-editing to make sure I had the original track. I kept telling myself it was a practical joke of some kind, but I couldn't figure out how the prankster could have known I was going to speed up the tapes. I could have told the rest of my crew about it, but I was terrified about looking like an idiot for having missed some obvious explanation. I decided to wait until I'd collected a bit more proof instead. I barely slept that night, mind spinning with possibilities. Maybe it was my mind playing tricks on me. But around 2 a.m, the gentle lull of the boat seemed to change. I didn't exactly hear the sound, but I could feel it. The reverberations and the ship sinking into my bones, teasing me, beckoning me. I was getting pretty tired and angry at this point, and I wasn't the only one. "Turn the damn engine off," someone yelled. "What the hell, man? It's going to ruin the recording and chase everything away." So that's what I'd felt. I'd forced myself to take a deep breath and close my eyes again. "It was never on. Go back to sleep, blockhead," our captain replied. The vibrations were only getting stronger. I sat up and stared out the porthole at the vastness of the black ocean. My mind was a carefully regulated numbness, afraid to let any thoughts in fear for of where they would race from there. Then the shouting began, and it was all replaced with a different kind of numb, blind panic. How did we get off course? Where the hell are we? We haven't moved. Check the GPS. But that wasn't there last night. What is it? I flew out of bed, already fully clothed because of the freezing temperatures. A dark, rolling wave passed by the porthole, completely out of sync with the rest of them. Everyone was waking up now, all clambering to get on deck to see what was going on. I went for my laptop instead, going straight to the folder with the new recordings. The deep moaning call was deafening, maxing out my speakers. It was much, much closer now. My fingers were shaking as I imported the audio into an editor, then sped up the track. My foot was tapping a river dance all by itself. I needed to see what everyone else was seeing, but I was the only one who knew how to listen. More shouts, meanwhile. Iceberg, 11 o'clock. That's the one you were walking on yesterday, right? Yeah, me and David. You labelled it as dry dock type, right? It was a dry dock yesterday. Absolutely. David went all the way down to the channel. So, why is it like a pinnacle now? Look at the waterline. The whole thing is rising. Spanish from the recording. I kept scrubbing through, picking up a few isolated English words as I went. Frozen. Thawed. Hungry. Those stood out from the random scattered words. Turn the engine on now, I screamed. There was a lot of shouting above deck. I couldn't make sense of it. I bolted up the stairs just in time to see. That's not an ice pinnacle. It's a fin. At least 20 feet high. Sinuous webbing connected the very long bony spurs, which continued to rise out of the water. The captain was finally behind the wheel, and the engine roared to life. A swelling wave lifted the whole ship at least a dozen feet in the air, hurling us back down at a near 45-degree angle. The impetuous combined with our acceleration to launch us away at reckless pace, hurling everyone and everything that wasn't tied down. The whole iceberg we'd been stationed next to had vanished behind us. That was 4 hours ago, and we haven't slowed down yet. No one has spotted the fin again, but it must still be below us, because the hydrophone is blasting that sonorous echo. We wouldn't make any official announcements to the scientific community until we had a chance to analyze the rest of the tapes, but I needed someone out there to know what happened, just in case we do not make it back.
We don't talk about the ones who never come back. Not in my house, not at school, not anywhere in my town. But not talking about them doesn't bring them back. And it doesn't stop more people from disappearing. So I'm going to tell you everything I know. The first disappearance I remember is Julie Wilkins in 3rd grade. She had blonde pigtails and always wore a bright red sweater, even in the summer. I didn't think anything of the first day she was gone, but I asked my teacher about her the second day. Julie? She's sitting right over there in her usual spot, Miss Peterson replied. The girl sitting in Julie's spot wore the same bright sweater, but she had black hair and a mean face, and didn't look anything like Julie. I tried to explain that to the teacher, but Miss Peterson wouldn't listen. I kept insisting, louder and louder, growing red in the face and screaming when the teacher wouldn't listen. I ran over to the imposter and pulled her hair, demanding with all single-minded fury of a 9-year-old girl to know what happened to Julie's pigtails. She cried and started pulling my hair back, and soon both of us were sent home early. I watched the mean-faced girl get picked up by Miss Wilkins, Julie's mom. The woman hugged the girl and helped her into the back seat, and they drove away together. And every day after that, the girl with black hair would sit in Julie's chair and chat with Julie's friends. Until after about a month, I finally let it go and started calling her Julie too. Kate Bennett in 6th grade, Steve Oshaki in 8th, Lisa Wellington, junior year. There was never a fuss about it, so there were probably more that I didn't notice. I actually liked the new Lisa considerably more than the old one who used to stick gum everywhere. But that didn't make it okay. Because every time it happened, I couldn't stop thinking about what it would be like if I was next. I didn't like the idea of someone else sleeping in my bed or hugging my mother. I liked the idea of what might have happened to the original people even less. As I got older, I started thinking there was something wrong with me. If their closest friends and family didn't notice the change, then maybe there was no change at all. Maybe I misremembered or hallucinated. Maybe there was something wrong with my eyes or my brain, some unseen tumor quietly swelling until the day I wouldn't know anyone and no one will know me. I still lived in the small town during college, though, and didn't forget the lesson I learned in 3rd grade. I kept my mouth shut and pretended not to notice. But it was a lot harder to pretend when I woke up one morning to find a stranger sleeping next to me where my fiancé used to be. I didn't wake him. I just watched him sleep, trying to imagine what would come of us. The new Robert wasn't unhandsome. He was in better shape than my fiancé had been. If the other replacements were any indication, then he'd still know who I was and what I meant to him. I tried to go along with it, but couldn't even make it through the first morning. I flinched when he kissed me, and just watching him get dressed in Robert's clothes was enough to make me miss my real fiancé. I lay in bed pretending I was sick until he left for work. Then I jumped up and started packing my things. I was gone before he got back. No message, no letter, no explanation. Why should I try to mend a stranger's broken heart when I had no one to mend mine? The new Robert didn't let me go that easily. I blocked his number, but messages kept slipping through. Social media, email, he even renamed our shared Netflix account to say he misses me. I finally confronted him when he found out which friend I was staying with and knocked on the door. It's not you, it's me. Weeks of suffering from an invisible wound, and that's the best I could come up with. I tried to convince him that I was sick and needed to be alone, and he tried to convince me that he would help me get better. I'd almost gotten rid of him when my stupid friend started crying and thanking the stranger for not giving up on me. I guess that's when I gave up on myself. I let the man take me back to the place that used to be my home. I stood stiff as a board when he hugged me, and the hair on the back of my neck stood on end when he stroked my head and told me that we would get through this together. Then I lay beside him in the bed we shared and wondered how the warmth of his body felt so much colder than love. I didn't sleep that night. I guess that's why I was the only one to hear the knock on the door after midnight. A burst of tentative taps, almost like someone wanted to be heard and was afraid to be noticed at the same time. I thought about waking the stranger in my bed, but I decided that I felt safer when he was asleep. I lay in bed for several long seconds before I heard the knocking again. It was faster this time, more urgent. I slipped out of bed and crept down the stairs, not turning on any of the lights, checking that the door was still locked. Then, up to the peephole. It's cold out here, and I can't find my key, Robert said through the door. I stared at my real fiancé through the peephole. Are you in there? Hello? The rapid knocking once more. How could I open the door? How could I invite him into our home with another man upstairs in bed? But how could I not and risk losing him again? I stood frozen at the peephole, watching him huddling under his jacket for warmth. Let me in, he said again, louder this time. The other Robert would wake soon, if he hadn't already. Let me in! Let me in! Suddenly he leapt at the door and started hammering on it with his fist. I jumped away from the shuddering wood in surprise, tripping over myself and collapsing onto my ass. The original Robert fell instantly quiet, no doubt hearing me. I know you're there. Don't do this to me. Let me in! Let me in! And the hammering returned, stronger than ever. The whole door was trembling in its frame. The first light turned on upstairs, and shortly later the creak of wood from the steps. I unlocked the door and flung it open. I clenched my eyes and embraced for impact, expecting the real Robert to come flying into the room from his momentum. Honey, what's going on down there? The stranger's voice. I don't know, I thought I heard something, I said, my voice ringing hollow in my own ears as I stared at the empty darkness. I took a step outside and welcomed the freezing air enveloping my skin. You're already sick. Don't make it worse. I took another step in defiance. I'm not sick, I told him, my voice more level than it had ever been. I just don't love you. That's all. His snarl lasted less than a second, but it was enough so that I couldn't see his face without remembering it. Don't you dare follow him, the stranger said. Follow who? I asked innocently, taking another step into the freezing night. The snarl returned, and this time it took several seconds to fade. He half turned away from me. Then, apparently changing his mind, he lunged through the door after me. I was already running as fast as I could, the icy concrete driveway stinging my feet, as though some of the skin was left behind with every step. Don't go out there, he shouted behind me. You'll disappear too. I wouldn't have minded disappearing, though. I could disappear with Robert. The other ones can have my house. They can get up, dressed in our clothes, and laugh with our friends and eat Christmas dinner with my family. But they wouldn't have us. So I just kept running, calling for Robert and hoping that he'd find me before my lungs froze stiff, before the stranger caught me and dragged me back, and fussed over me until I believed that I was sick too. I ran for as long as I could, screaming until my throat was raw, but I didn't find Robert. The stranger had given up hours ago, but I kept going until morning, when my fingers and toes were black and blue, and my blood felt like ice in my veins. And by the first touch of light, I found myself back at the house that had been my home, back to wondering whether I was really sick, and whether it would be the death of me. Only, it wasn't my home anymore. The stranger who had replaced Robert was kissing his new fiancée, who had replaced me. And there was our neighbor, greeting them with good morning as though he'd known them both for years. And life goes on for the rest of the world who don't talk about the ones who never come back. As for me, without friends or family or a home to call my own, I finally know where the ones who disappear go. They can go anywhere, because there's nothing left to hold them back.
Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. I really hope you did enjoy tonight's tales. I do love me some good creepypastas. A huge thank you, of course, to the incredibly talented Celeste Sally for her amazing work and for producing all the audio really quickly. I really appreciated that. Now, like I said at the start, she has got even more stories over on her channel, 2 of which I have narrated in the sister video to this one. So, what are you waiting for? The link is in the description and on screen now. I'll see you over there.